Hi everyone, welcome to Green Sprout Living. I'm Nikki and I thought today I would take you along to check out my July garden. It is midsummer. The garden is looking a little bit rough right now, as most gardens do in mid to late summer. So I'm bringing you in a little bit later in the game, but I thought I would show you what my plans were for some of the fall garden, and kind of give you an insight as to where I started and the journey that I'm going on. So let's go check out my garden. Okay, as you can see, I have 8 beds. All 8 beds have got the arch trellis over them so I can do vertical growing. Right here in the middle, I have 5 cattle panels that stretch out for my tomatoes for more vertical growing, and on the very end, we just added a new addition to the garden, which is the raised beds here. So I have a few things in here growing. Some of the things I need to get taken out because I'm having a little bit of pest pressure. We are late in the game here, so a lot of my beds need to be cleared out. I have cleared out a lot of my spring harvest, so I'll show you exactly what I have in each bed. This bed here, the first bed, I grew onions. I've already got them out, drying out and curing. I've harvested some of the Swiss chard, and then I did plant a couple of butternut squash. So we have had a ton of rain here lately, so I'm having a little bit of problems with, like, I think it's a bacterial, so I may actually have to pull some of these plants out, which I'm really bummed about, but it's not too late to replant, so I may be able to get some things replanted. Okay, like I said, I have 8 beds with vertical, so I'm going to go down one side and then back around the other. Okay, so in the next bed here, I have some cauliflower. In the middle, I have kale, and right in between, I have a nasturtium, but you really cannot see it. It's kind of being taken over by the kale. In the middle here, I just planted a muskmelon, and again, it's kind of getting some pest pressure, so I don't know. I may have to amend and treat these beds, so we'll see. I've never grown the tomato plants on the arch trellis ways. This will be my first year. I always grow them on the cattle panels, the straight cattle panels back here. So I had a little bit of issue with compost this year. So I am trying to get as much yield out of my tomatoes as possible because I'm afraid I'm not going to get very much. We'll see what happens there. They're growing up really nice. So the third bed on this side is some Brussels sprouts here. I have collards, which I've harvested quite a bit of those. Right here on the other side, I had some kohlrabi, I think is how you say it, which I've already harvested everything except for the one right there. So on my arch trellis way, I have 2 different kinds of cucumbers. I don't know that you're supposed to plant them that close together because of cross-pollination, but I'm not saving the seeds, so it really should not matter. I've got All-American pickling, I believe, and I have the Burpless cucumbers. Okay, so the fourth bed on this side I started in February. I started with 2 rows of radishes, turnips, beets, rutabagas, and also I had a patch of spinach, and then on the trellis way I had sugar snap peas. So this bed is amended and ready to be replanted. I believe that I'm going to do some beans in here. I should have plenty of time to get those in and have a good harvest before winter. So on the other side of the arch trellis way, I've tried to plant blue light pole beans on this one. However, I have a lot of critter pressure. I have tons of bunnies that are eating the starts. So let's see here. I have Swiss chard here that is definitely ready to be harvesting. You can kind of see I have some caterpillar damage there, but we have harvested so much of this and I planted way too much. The next thing that I had here is I had some beets. I just harvested the beets last night, so we'll be canning those up very soon. Probably tomorrow. I have a day off of the salon, so I will be in the kitchen doing some canning. I also had a patch of arugula, and I harvested all of that. And then at the very last there is some carrots. They're looking a little sparse. I think the bunnies really like the carrots too, so they should probably be getting close to being pulled out as well. So how I usually amend my soil is I top dress with compost. This year we've had a little bit of an issue with compost contamination, so a few of my beds and my new beds, all of my new beds were filled with it. So I've had a little bit of struggle this year trying to get anything to grow. This bed here was one of the first beds that I top dressed with this compost. So these are all pepper plants, and they are all suffering pretty badly. They are not producing, and the top parts of them are kind of curling like curly top virus. However, the only plants that are being affected are the plants that are in the compost. I'm not going to probably get any kind of yield from these pepper plants, but I'm hoping that by planting them there, it will help eliminate some of the herbicide that was used. Okay, as you can tell by the tops of them, they're curling, they're struggling, and they look beautiful in green, but they are not flowering. So they will get a bud like this, but what happens is they dry up and fall off. Now this is cucamelons here. I've never grown these before either. I do absolutely love the way it looks, and I am getting little fruit, but they are kind of struggling as well as far as being curling up really bad. I'm not seeing a lot of pest on them, but I am seeing a lot of the curling leaves. So we'll see. It looks a lot better now than it did before. It's growing nicely, but I'm not for sure that we will get any kind of production from it. So, okay, so my last two beds I had pretty good production with as well. Like I say, it's at the end of the season, so my zucchini plants are looking a little bit tough. I have harvested more than enough zucchini as of right now, so I'm going to be pulling these plants out, and I have 3 yellow squash up there as well that are doing very well. I did plant some of the extra tomato plants that I had, one on each side. Now this bed was also top dressed with the compost. It did not affect the zucchini or the squash, but I am seeing a little bit of the curling with the tomato plants. It's still producing and it's not as bad, but I did actually go in and scrape off as much compost as I possibly could out of these beds to hopefully trying to help it. This last and final bed here, I planted the butternut squash right there on the trellis. I had artichoke over here that ended up getting eaten by little critters, and right here I planted soya beans and they did not produce as well. So I think that my little critters got most of my harvest. I didn't cover it, and I usually cover with row cover, but I kind of got lazy this year and kind of let things go by the wayside. Off to my tomatoes. Now, I know that there are some people that say you should do crop rotation and you should not plant your stuff in the same place every year. I completely understand that, and I do agree to some point. I also believe that with living soil, if you keep the soil microbes alive and healthy, then you will not get near the pest pressure or disease. So that's what I do. My tomatoes are planted in the same place every year, and I've never had an issue. So this year, I will be 100% honest with you. I cannot tell you what I planted because I top dressed with the compost, and then I planted my regular plants that I usually plant. I have 5 cattle panels, and I usually plant a different variety on each one. And my last one being my experimental tomatoes. So the tomatoes that I grow a new variety every year. So I always try to plant my Romas and then my San Marzanos. I go for like Cherokee Purple and my Dr. Witchies, and then I usually do some experimental ones. But this year, all of my plants withered up and had the issue with the herbicide damage. So I ripped all of them up. I completely removed all of the compost, and I replanted with all the plants that I had left from selling at the market. The 2 varieties that I have right now are Arkansas Traveler and Rutger, and I think I have maybe a Subarctic Plenty and a Terracotta Thornburn. Well, that's what I'm getting this year. I'll be thankful if I get anything, but it's going to be kind of hard to give you a show of what my tomato plants are because I'm not really sure exactly what was planted in them. Honestly, did not think that they were going to produce anything. As far as my raised beds that I have, nothing grew in them. In the very back here, I started off with my potatoes. And what I did is I planted my potatoes on each side, and then right down the middle, I planted my beans. I planted horticulture beans, or my grandma used to call them shellies. So they're just shelling beans. And then on the other side as well, back there behind me, I did the same thing. So I had a row of potatoes, a row of beans, and then a row of potatoes. Here in the middle, I did the same thing, except for I had different beans. I had potatoes on each side. Right down the middle, I had Blue Lake bush beans, green beans. And all of my potatoes withered up, looked really bad. They didn't bloom, so I pulled them out. None of my beans germinated at all. I read up on the herbicide that was used in my garden, and it does not affect anything in the Brassicaceae family or the grass family. So I planted corn because it will help detoxify the soil. The other side, I have planted some sunflowers. The deer are loving my sunflowers. They keep eating the heads off my sunflowers. I'm not getting very many pretty sunflowers this year. And then the rest of these plants here are just left over that I had from selling at the market. So every year I plant a ton in my greenhouse, and then I sell starts. So these are the ones that I had left over. I didn't expect for them to produce. I basically was just trying to plant them to detoxify the soil of some sort. I am getting a few peppers, but if you can tell, my tomatoes in here are horrible. And these are just, like I say, I had left over, so I just planted them in there, and they just are curling up to no end. Hopefully by planting them, I will be pulling out some of that stuff. I will dispose of the plants. So right here in the middle, I've planted a purple sweet potato on either side. Now, here in the future, we're going to put a trellis over the top, just like we have here, so that way I can do some more vertical growing. And then I thought about putting maybe a little chair and table here, because everybody needs a chair in their garden, right? These are the only flowers that I've actually put in here. The petunias, I need to get some more flowers planted in here. That is definitely a goal of mine, to incorporate more flowers in my garden. The very last side over here, I did try to plant tzatziki beans right here. Again, it's a broadleaf herbicide, so none of the beans came up. Here's some extra pepper plants that I had. I had cayenne peppers. I didn't even plant those, but I planted them a year ago. That somehow came up, which is great. Whatever, I love cayenne peppers. And then I have some sunflowers over here. So my garden's looking pretty weak, really. It's probably one of the worst garden years I've had in a few years. But you know what? It's a learning experience, and I'll embrace it, because now I know more than I did before. Okay, so I have a plan that for the garden beds behind me be mostly my fall garden. Now, I do have the other raised beds with the arch trellis way that I will be using. The compost that I have in these beds I think will do fine with brassicas, so I'm going to plant most of this bed with brassicas. Now, I'm a little bit late to the game on some of the things, but I'm hoping. I still have 93 days left in the growing season, so I think I'll be okay. You'll see probably my fall garden looking a little bit better than my summer garden, I'm hoping. So I thought I'd give you a little backstory of how I began my gardening journey. I just started gardening because I just felt like that's what adults did, right? Like, you grew a garden whenever you got older and you grew your own food. I didn't really expect it to take off and for it to be such a success and me find such a passion for it like I have. The first year, like I said, I knew nothing about gardening. My parents gardened, but I absolutely hated the task of helping in the garden. I thought it was the worst thing I ever had to do, is snap green beans and shell peas and pick weeds. Like, who wanted to do that as a kid? So I had an actual hate for the garden. But I thought, you know what? I'm an adult. It's time for me to have a garden. I talked my husband into making a garden. He worked for a farmer for a while, and he's like, I've heard of this 12-12-12. So it was a fertilizer that we went and got, and we sprinkled it all over the yard. Then we tilled it up, Then we ran to the local farmers market to buy all of our plant starts. And I had no idea how many plants I needed. I had no idea what plants I would even need to be buying or what seeds I needed to be buying. I started with the basic tomatoes and peppers, all the things that they sell at the local feed store, and I bought a ton of them. I bought so many of them, and mind you, this is before I started doing any kind of preserving. I just thought I needed to grow food, and my husband's real good about making things even and in rows. So he lined up my rows for me, and I planted, and I planted, and I planted. And the whole one side of my garden was a tomato bush. So I knew nothing about spacing. I knew nothing about pest pressure or a weed control or how to even maintain this garden. But we planted it anyway. And it was actually kind of remarkable because we had such a great harvest. Like, that year was an amazing year. And I do believe that if we weren't blessed with such a great yield, that I don't know that I would have done it. I wish that I would have started this YouTube channel years ago as I was starting out, because it would have helped me stay a little bit more humble as to where I am now, because there's times that I think, oh, I've got this all figured out, like I know everything. And then something like contaminated compost happens, and then it kind of puts me down to my level, and it makes me realize we're all learners in the garden. We are learning every year. Something new will come up, and you can't quit learning. You can't quit trying to grow. I think it was the second year into it, I just got lazy. And tilling is hard. The weeds come back so much, and the stress was overwhelming because I had all of this fruit and I didn't know what to do with it. And my husband's like, I'm gonna mow the garden down. Like, it is just a weed patch. You can't tell where the plant ends and the weed begins. So he did. And I have to say, that was almost like it broke my heart. I did not realize how much giving up all of that harvest was going to just kind of crush me. So from that moment, I started learning, and I really started digging in deep, because I was like, it's not happening again. I'm not going to let this happen again. We've tried so many different methods of gardening. We have done the traditional gardening where you till up the ground. We have done the Back to Eden garden where you layer wood chips. We've done the vertical, we've done raised beds, and my favorite by far has been the no-dig method. I do like our raised beds, and I do like mulching in between because it's aesthetically pleasing. So I like the way it looks, and that's why we have the raised beds. If I was going to be market gardening or something like that, I would definitely do the no-till method, where you just put the cardboard down and put the compost on top. However, I like the aesthetic look of the vertical gardening and the beds. Now that we have the method of gardening that we prefer, we just have to incorporate all the things that we want to grow and keep learning. Like, every year is a new trial for me. Every year I want to add something new, or I want to expand. So the future for us is to just learn a lot more. I would love to learn more about composting. I would love to learn more about growing herbs. I would love to have more fruit trees and berry bushes, but that all will happen in the right time. So we just have to be patient and know that every step you take is a step closer to your end goal. So we expanded from the garden on the other side of the house, and I put in an herb garden a few years ago. So I do have some herbs that I do use. I'm not an herbalist. I don't know a lot about herbs. I just know that they're really good for pollination, so I thought I would plant it. And they're beautiful. I can show you around on some of the herbs that I have, and maybe you can help me figure out what some of them are, because I planted them a couple years ago, and I planted them for pollinators. I didn't really plant them for consumption, but I think they would be good if I knew what they were. Okay, so we'll start over here. I definitely know that I have my chamomile. I planted dill a few years ago, and it has came back in abundance. This one here, I believe, is a form of sage. It's got the purple flowers on them, but I'm not really sure. It smells like sage. This one here is a thyme. I just have never preserved them. So this one here, I am not sure. I believe it's a sort of oregano, but maybe you could tell me if you know. Okay, so this one here is my lemon thyme, and this one here smells amazing. My purple coneflower or echinacea. Now I just seen, oh, look at the pollinator. Look at that little guy. So the echinacea, I believe, is a really good medicinal herb. I just read the other day that you can use the roots. So I think I might try that this year. This is the second year that this has been here. So I'm going to try to dig up some of the roots, and they are supposed to be, I think they're supposed to be more potent or have a way more beneficial medicinal properties than just the flower itself. So I'm going to probably pull up some of those roots and use them, dry them out, and plant them other places. So I love the way the purple coneflower. I may take some to my garden and actually plant some in there. This next one here is bee balm. I don't know what that's used for. I'm sure it has great, wonderful medicinal properties. I have just never used it. I don't know anything about it. So if any of you know what I could do with that, let me know. It looks like I have a volunteer lemon balm here, which is wonderful because I killed my lemon balm. I don't know how I did that because it's part of the mint family and you can't hardly kill that, but it's came back. I do have other things that I do grow. I have tons of strawberries that we preserve. They are amazing yielding strawberries. And I do have several elderberry bushes too, which I absolutely love, and I will be propagating them this fall as well to try to get some more bushes going from that. I've got some harvesting of my onions. I have some of my fall seed starts here, and then here is my lovely greenhouse that my husband built me in the winter time 2 years ago. It was a labor of love. It was about 20 degrees out, and my husband was building and painting a greenhouse for me because he had to get it done before February. So that was my end of July garden tour. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing what we can grow in the fall. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.